Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into Steve Jobs' 2005 Stanford commencement address.
Yeah, but specifically, we're looking at how another analysis introduces that speech.
Yeah.
Like the setup.
Exactly. Think of it as, a quick way to grasp why this speech still matters so much for, anyone looking for a bit of fuel, personal or professional.
And what's interesting, right off the bat, is how this intro paints him.
Yeah.
Not just the Apple guy.
Right.
But like the master storyteller, the think different visionary. It hints there's more going on than just business success.
Totally. And the context, Stanford 2005, graduates ready to start out. This intro piece we're digging into, it flags the key stuff. Sets him up as this, innovator, sure, but also someone who could weave a narrative. Remember those keynotes?
Oh, absolutely. Legendary. And that think different idea just permeated everything.
So these intro remarks, they're kind of curating the experience for us, aren't they?
They really are. It suggests we're getting a personal story full of lessons. The storytelling focus makes you wonder how he framed his own ups and downs.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how the intro brings up the tough stuff? Dropping out of college?
Yeah, and getting fired from his own company.
Right, but it doesn't frame them as failures, more like necessary parts of the journey. It shifts your perspective on setbacks.
That's a key point, the perspective.
I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life.
The start of Jobs' own story is, pretty unexpected right from his birth.
Absolutely. His path definitely didn't begin the way anyone planned. His biological mother, she had this really strong wish for him to be adopted by college graduates.
But that didn't happen initially. The first couple backed out, and he ended up with parents who hadn't been to college.
Yeah, and there was this moment where his biological mother almost didn't sign the papers because of that. His adoptive mom hadn't finished college. His dad hadn't finished high school.
It was only when they really promised that he would definitely go to college, that she finally agreed. So talk about an unexpected start.
And that really makes you think, doesn't it, about your own path to success. Sometimes these things we couldn't possibly foresee, these kind of detours right at the beginning.
They set the stage for everything else. They might even lead to opportunities or perspectives you wouldn't have had otherwise.
It definitely makes you reflect on the unexpected turns in your own life and how they might have shaped where you are now on your path.
So fast forward 17 years, his parents kept their promise and Jobs went to college.
But he admits he was a bit naive about it. Chose a college, Reed College, that was super expensive, almost like Stanford, he said.
Yeah, and his parents, working class people, were pouring all their savings into it.
And then, just 6 months in, he does something pretty drastic.
He drops out.
Yeah. It seems counterintuitive, right, after that whole promise.
Totally. But his reason was, well, he just couldn't see the value. He said he was lost, didn't have a clue what he wanted to do.
And couldn't see how college was actually helping him figure that out, which is a big deal when you think about pouring everything into it.
And for our listeners, thinking about getting knowledge effectively, this wasn't some strategic move.
Not at all. It sounds like it was purely a reaction. Feeling overwhelmed, the financial burden.
And just this gut feeling, right, that this path wasn't it.
Exactly. It's maybe one of the first clear examples of him really trusting his intuition, even though he had no alternative plan lined up.
He just knew the current path felt wrong.
Which makes you wonder, how often do we stick to something just because it's expected, even if our gut is screaming otherwise? A key question for anyone on their paths to success.
So what happens next is also really telling. Life after dropping out.
So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
It wasn't glamorous?
Not even close. No dorm room, so he's like crashing on friends' floors.
He talked about returning Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposit just to get money for food. Can you imagine?
And walking miles, 7 miles, he said, every Sunday just to get one good meal a week at the local Hare Krishna temple.
Wow.
But these experiences, however tough, they teach something else, don't they? About resourcefulness.
Yeah, learning outside the classroom, definitely. Finding sustenance, literally and maybe figuratively, too.
I think so. It builds resilience, grit, maybe. Things that are pretty essential on any challenging path, including the path to success.
And it also ties into this idea of following curiosity, because that's what led him to the calligraphy class.
Right. Once he wasn't tied down by required courses, he could just drop in on things that looked interesting.
And calligraphy, for some reason, caught his eye.
What's amazing here is that he explicitly says, he saw zero practical application for it in his life at that moment.
None whatsoever. It wasn't about a job or a skill he thought he'd need.
He just got fascinated by it, learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about spacing, about what makes typography beautiful. Purely art for art's sake, it seems.
It sounds like such a random detour, doesn't it? Just following an interest with no goal in mind.
But this is exactly where that connecting the dots idea comes into play, just much later.
Yeah, flash forward about 10 years. They're designing the first Macintosh computer.
And suddenly, all that stuff you learned about calligraphy, it comes flooding back.
It becomes crucial. They designed the Mac with beautiful typography built right in.
It was the first personal computer with multiple typefaces and proportionally spaced fonts. Think about that.
It's kind of mind-blowing if he hadn't randomly dropped into that calligraphy class years earlier.
Personal computers might look totally different. He even pointed out that since Windows basically copied the Mac,
it's possible no personal computer would have had that kind of typographic richness, all from following a seemingly useless curiosity.
And that is the core of it, isn't it? You cannot connect the dots looking forward. It's impossible.
You can only do it looking back, seeing how these apparently random threads actually wove together.
Which leads to his main point.
Yeah.
You have to trust in something.
Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever you call it. You just have to trust.
Because that trust, he argues, is what gives you the confidence to follow your heart.
Even when it leads you off the well-worn path, the path everyone expects you to take.
Believing that somehow, someday, those dots will connect. That gives you the freedom to pursue things that don't make immediate sense. It's fundamental to carving your own path to success.
So for you listening, thinking about your own path to success, how does that land, this idea of trusting the process, trusting those detours?
Have there been things you were drawn to, maybe learned, that seemed irrelevant at the time?
It makes you question how often we ignore those little sparks of interest because they don't seem, productive right away.
Yeah, Jobs' story really suggests that maybe the seeds for future breakthroughs for your own path might be hiding in those unexpected interests.
So wrapping up our look at this first story from Jobs, the big takeaway seems to be about embracing the unpredictable nature of your path to success.
Absolutely. Trusting your gut, valuing experiences even if they don't seem relevant now.
And having faith that things might connect in surprising ways down the road.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening as you think about your own path to success. Can you recall a time when something you learned or did just out of interest with no real goal turned out to be incredibly valuable later on?
And maybe how could leaning into that trust in the unknown dots, help you navigate your path forward with a bit more, perhaps, curiosity and courage?
My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. When we did, our board of directors sided with him. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating. I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly. I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did. The turn of events at Apple had not changed that one bit. I'd been rejected, but I was still in love. And so I decided to start over. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Lorene and I have a wonderful family together.
How raw it feels. It's not some polished corporate statement.
No, definitely not.
It's really personal, and I think it gives you a lot to chew on about, well, navigating life's ups and downs.
Yeah.
Makes you think about your own path.
Exactly. It's a chance to learn from someone who really shaped things,
Yeah.
through huge successes, but also some pretty big failures.
Right. So we'll be looking at three main threads here.
Okay.
First, that initial spark, the passion that got Apple started. Then, maybe the most dramatic part, getting fired from his own company and what happened after.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And finally, his thoughts on life, death, and making choices that really count.
I think there are definitely some moments in there that'll make people pause,
Yeah.
reconsider things.
I agree. It's a story about innovation, sure, but also resilience and perspective, what really matters in the end.
Okay, let's unpack this first bit then. He talks about finding his passion early on, starting Apple with W.E. Wozniak in his parents' garage. He was just 20.
Yeah, think about that. A garage, that's where it all began.
That's kind of the classic story, isn't it?
It is, but what's wild is how fast it took off. That spark. Within 10 years, it's a $2 billion company.
Wow.
4,000 employees. I mean, just explosive growth.
And that leads up to releasing the Macintosh, right?
Yeah, which is a huge deal, massive deal. Changed how people use computers, the whole interface, it was revolutionary for its time. But then just when you think they're hitting this incredible peak,
Bang, he gets fired.
At 30.
Right after launching what he called their finest creation.
Fired from the company he started. It's almost unbelievable.
How does he talk about that? The feel?
Oh, he doesn't downplay it at all. Uses the word devastating.
Yeah.
Said his whole focus, his entire adult life just vanished. And he talks about this feeling of letting people down, like the previous generation of entrepreneurs. He even considered just packing up and leaving Silicon Valley.
You can really feel the weight of that. It wasn't just a job he lost.
No, it was his identity wrapped up in Apple. But, okay, here's where the story takes a turn and it gets really interesting.
Right, because he doesn't just give up.
Exactly. He has this realization. Even after being kicked out, the love for the work itself, that hadn't gone away. The actual act of creating, solving problems, that passion was still there.
That's key, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the core feeling remained.
It's crucial. He describes being rejected, but still having that connection. And that passion becomes the reason, the fuel to just start over.
It suggests that real passion isn't just about the company name or the success.
It's deeper. It's the enjoyment of the process, right? That's what gets you through the tough times.
And starting over wasn't small scale. He mentions this shift, going from the heaviness of being successful.
Yeah, all the pressure and expectation.
To the lightness of being a beginner again.
I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle. My third story is about death. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes.
It sounds like it was freeing almost.
Precisely. And that freedom, that lightness, it sparked this incredibly creative phase. He starts NextT, he starts Pixar, all within about 5 years.
2 major companies.
Right. And it's fascinating because being forced away from Apple let him explore completely new areas. NextT did some really innovative stuff with software.
Even if it wasn't a huge commercial hit initially.
Correct, but technically very advanced. And Pixar basically invented a new kind of movie making.
Toy Story, the first full computer animated feature, changed everything in animation.
Totally revolutionized it, became this powerhouse. And it's kind of amazing to think that this huge success story partly grew out of him being fired.
It's an incredible example of resilience, turning that negative into something massive.
It really is. And then the story takes another twist.
The return.
Yeah, Apple ends up buying NextT, which brings him back into the fold.
And he specifically points out that the technology they developed at NextT
was core to Apple's big comeback later on, at the heart of Apple's current renaissance, I think he says.
So the company that fired him ended up needing what he built after they fired him.
Exactly. It shows how things you see as setbacks can, plant seeds for future success in ways you just can't predict.
Feels almost like fate in a way. And he also mentions finding personal happiness then too, right? Falling in love, starting his family.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't just professional reinvention, it was personal fulfillment too. Like that unexpected detour led him somewhere richer overall.
Makes you wonder if those things are often connected.
It suggests life isn't usually a straight line, Those winding paths can lead to better places. He even calls the firing awful tasting medicine
that the patient needed. Yeah, I remember that.
It's such a strong image. Painful experiences that are somehow necessary for growth.
Okay, so we've seen the passion, the spark, then this huge loss that weirdly becomes a catalyst for more creativity and eventually a return. Now, this third part of his reflection goes even deeper. It's about life, mortality. He brings up a quote he found when he was 17.
Yeah. If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right.
And that's pretty heavy stuff for a teenager.
It is, but it obviously stuck with him, became like a guiding principle. He says for, 33 years, he'd look in the mirror every morning and ask himself that.
Ask himself if today was his last day, would he be happy doing what he was about to do?
Exactly. And the key thing, he actually acted on it. He says if the answer was no, too many days running, he knew he had to change something.
That's real commitment to an idea, not just thinking about it, but using it as a daily check-in, a tool. Almost.
A tool for staying aligned, yeah.
Right.
Cutting through the noise. And he connects this directly to dealing with fear.
How so?
He says remembering you're going to die is the best way he knows to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. External expectations, pride, fear of failure.
It all just falls away.
It strips it all away, leaving only what's truly important. He frames it as this ultimate perspective giver for making big choices. Because, you're already naked, basically. Nothing to lose by being true to yourself.
And then, tragically, this wasn't just theoretical for him. He shares the story of his cancer diagnosis.
Right, which initially sounded like a death sentence. An incurable type, maybe 3 to 6 months left.
That must have made that quote incredibly real, incredibly immediate.
Unimaginably so. He talks about the doctor telling him to get his affairs in order.
Which he says basically means prepare to die. Tell your family goodbye.
Yeah. It takes all that earlier reflection on mortality and makes it intensely personal, visceral.
What do you think sharing that adds to his overall message?
I think it just powerfully underlines that urgency about living authentically. When you're face to face with limited time, all that stuff, external validation, fear of what others think, it becomes meaningless.
Utterly irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's just about what matters to you.
Yeah. So you see these threads weaving together, the passion driving him, the unexpected growth from loss, and this deep awareness of life's preciousness guiding his choices.
It feels very connected. The core seems to be about finding what you love, right? He really hammers that point.
He does. Keep looking. Don't settle. That's the imperative. Don't just accept something that isn't fulfilling, whether it's work or, well, anything important.
And it's just remarkable how that huge setback, getting fired, wasn't the end. It was almost like a necessary detour.
A redirection, yeah. It opened up space for Next T for Pixar and ultimately brought him back to Apple stronger, in a way. Shows that failures can be opportunities in disguise.
And tying it all together is that awareness of mortality. Not in a dark way, but as a tool for clarity.
As a compass, exactly. To make sure you're focusing your finite time and energy on what truly gives your life meaning.
I lived with that diagnosis all day. Later that evening, I had a biopsy where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach and into my intestines, put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the doctor started crying because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery. I had the surgery, and thankfully, I'm fine now. This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
Why living authentically mattered so much, and of course that famous line, stay hungry, stay foolish. What do you mean by that?
Right. And it's fascinating because his own brush with mortality, it clearly deeply shaped these views.
Absolutely. He mentions the shock, right? The cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then that huge relief when he found out it was, well, treatable. Mm-hmm. But he says it plainly, no one wants to die. I think everyone gets that.
Yeah, even people who believe in heaven, as he points out.
Exactly. But then he flips it, calls death the single best invention of life, which is, wow.
Powerful reframing, isn't it?
Yeah. He saw it as this force for renewal. He says it clears out the old to make way for the new. What do you make of that specific idea?
Well, it's taking something we usually fear and seeing it as functional, necessary even, part of life's process.
So it's about change.
Exactly. Yeah. And thinking about that, about this impermanence, it really highlights how limited our time actually is. You know, your time is limited, like he says.
Right. It's not about being dark, but making the most of it, valuing the choices you make.
Precisely. Which leads directly into his other big point, doesn't it? About living authentically.
Yeah, that strong warning, don't waste your time living someone else's life.
And avoiding getting trapped by dogma. That's a key phrase.
What is dogma in his view, then?
Basically living by the results of other people's thinking, not your own. Following the crowd, maybe?
Okay, so resist that. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. That's pretty direct advice.
It really is. It's about finding that internal compass and, importantly, trusting it, even if it goes against the grain.
He follows that up by saying you need the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Because, and this is amazing, they somehow already know what you truly want to become.
That intuition piece is key.
And then adds everything else is secondary. That feels like a really core belief for him.
It absolutely does. It's about that deep self-knowledge, finding your own purpose, and really aligning your life with that, not just chasing, what other people expect.
Okay, so that brings us to the final piece. Stay hungry, stay foolish. He gives that great context about the whole Earth catalog.
Right. One of the Bibles of his generation, he calls it. Sort of like a pre-Google, but in paperback.
Yeah, and made with typewriters, scissors, Polaroid cameras, like incredibly low tech.
Which is amazing in itself, right? That contrast, it shows powerful ideas don't need fancy tech.
Good point. And this phrase, stay hungry, stay foolish, it was on the back cover of the final issue. A farewell message.
Yeah, under a photo of an early morning country road. Very evocative.
So what's the essence? What did he want us to take from that?
I think it's really a call to lifelong curiosity.
When I was young, there was an amazing publication called the Whole Earth Catalog, which was one of the Bibles of my generation. It was created by a fellow named Stuart Brand, not far from here in Menlo Park, and he brought it to life with his poetic touch. This was in the late 60s, before personal computers and desktop publishing, so it was all made with typewriters, scissors, and Polaroid cameras. It was sort of like Google in paperback form 35 years before Google came along. It was idealistic, overflowing with neat tools and great notions. Stuart and his team put out several issues of the Whole Earth Catalog, and then, when it had run its course, they put out a final issue. It was the mid-1970s, and I was your age. On the back cover of their final issue was a photograph of an early morning country road, the kind you might find yourself hitchhiking on if you were so adventurous. Beneath it were the words, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." It was their farewell message as they signed off. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And I have always wished that for myself. And now, as you graduate to begin anew, I wish that for you. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you all very much.
Never stop learning. That's the hungry part.
Okay, and the foolish.
That's about being willing to challenge things, to question assumptions, maybe even look silly sometimes by trying new things or thinking differently. Don't just accept the status quo.
Be willing to venture out, like that road in the picture, maybe.
Exactly. Stay open, stay curious. Don't get complacent. He clearly wished that for the audience, and you can tell it meant a lot to him personally.
So tying it all together, we have death as this maybe harsh but useful reminder of limited time.
Which pushes you toward living authentically, listening to that inner voice.
And doing that requires you to constantly learn and challenge things to stay hungry, stay foolish.
Yeah, they really work together, those ideas. The finite time makes living truthfully more urgent, and that hungry, foolish mindset is how you, maybe, figure out what that truth is and keep exploring it.
It's quite a coherent philosophy when you lay it out.
It is, grounded in his own pretty intense experiences.
So, for everyone listening, maybe think about which part of this resonates most with you right now. Is it facing the limited time? Is it finding that inner voice?
Yeah.
Or embracing that hungry and foolish spirit?
Yeah, how might that perspective maybe influence a choice you make today or this week?
Something to consider. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.